If you could see what I have seen, right, and this is what I want for every believer, and this is why we preach and we hope that they grab it and they hope they take a leap of faith and take us at our word and at God's word, really. But if you have seen what I've seen in every season of our life as believers, God has just been faithful and gracious. It's like there's a big part of me I can't wait to see what God's going to be faithful with next. I can't wait to see what God's going to be gracious with next, because this season has been way more than I could have ever asked for or imagined. And I can't wait to see how the next one looks. And in ministry, at the drop of a hat, when you surrender to God, you've got my life, you don't really know what that means in the moment.
Yeah.
And then as you start your journey, you see moments of sacrifice along the way. And some are easy, some are not, but this is what I've given my life to. Welcome to Let's Talk About That, the podcast where we take a deeper dive into Sunday's message and explore any questions you might have. I'm your host, AJ Stevens, joined by lead pastor Chip Parker, and I'm thrilled to be on this journey with you. Whether you're a longtime member of the Orchard or a first-time visitor, Let's Talk About That is your space to explore, reflect, and connect. Join us as we navigate the intricacies of faith, spirituality, and daily life, seeking to understand how the wisdom shared on Sundays can be applied to our modern challenges. So grab a cup of coffee, find a comfortable space, and let's dive in together. This is Let's Talk About That, where the conversation about Sunday's message never stops.
So, AJ, word on the street is that you got fired. Would you care to elaborate on that?
I want to let you guys know that's a lie. And I'm always weary of guys in leadership who lie right away. So that's the real reason. Just couldn't stand the lies anymore.
All I'm saying is I didn't say you got fired. I said word on the street was that you got fired.
No, I'm just kidding. Chip's not a liar.
Most of the time.
Most of the time. We all like to exaggerate a bit, right?
For the record, no, AJ did not get fired, even though I fully plan to tell everybody he did after he leaves.
I will have no way to know otherwise. So once I leave, do your worst.
However, he is leaving.
Yeah, sad. It's less sad today than it was yesterday. I know that for a fact.
Yeah.
Golly.
How was that?
It was awful. Ripped my heart out. But I think it's good. Like one of the things that we had, you have the term bittersweet, and even just telling the worship team and the student leaders Thursday night before Sunday, it's like it was brutally encouraging, because if you weren't sad, like it probably means the place didn't mean that much to you, you know? And this place just means a ton to not just me, but my wife, my kids. Like we love this place. And so that's why Sunday was so awful, because you're looking at people who have loved your family. You're looking at people who you've walked through hard parts of their marriage with, their kids come to Jesus, they come to Jesus, and you just have all these big life moments, and you're looking those people in the face and you're saying, hey, I've really appreciated everything, and I've really enjoyed getting to be a part of your story, but God's now moving us to be a part of somebody else's story. And it just, it's hard.
So, bearing the lead here, AJ and Katy and Dax and Sawyer and JJ, I would assume. I mean, I haven't checked with them.
Somebody texted me yesterday, said, you're moving? And I said, yes, I'm moving. And she said, wait, just you're leaving the kids and Katy staying? I was like, no, going with you.
So you're going to be moving to Virginia to take a position at a church up there. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that church, and then we'll kind of get into today the story of how this all came to be.
Yeah, the church up there is Liberty Live. It's in Hampton Roads, Virginia, which is right there on the coast.
I mean, it sounds lame if we're being honest.
Yeah, I mean, already just off to a terrible start. No, it's going to be, for all of you that regularly tune in for the beginning of this to figure out how turkey season went or what the fishing was like, take heart. There's good fishing up there, and I saw a lot of turkeys, and the goose hunting will probably be much better than the duck hunting, because the duck hunting's looking not great. But that's the area. Liberty Live is the church. They're a multi-site church too, like us, which is cool. So I'm sure there'll be some carryover with some of that, and we're excited to be up there, really. I mean,
and you have some connections up there, which are kind of part of the story. So you're not like dropping in cold, no idea about this place.
Yeah, not many connections, but yeah, we have some people who I have worked with previously in ministry, and then not really a couple now, I guess, because I've met the wife twice. We've been with them, but a buddy of mine from college who actually had a pretty, I don't know what the word would be here, a pretty impactful, monumental moment in ministry for me that I didn't really know was a thing until it was a thing. So And we can get into all that too. But those are the two guys that I know, a guy I worked with previously at Calvary, and then a guy who sacrificed some time and energy and led the baseball Bible studies at Liberty University. So,
okay, nice.
Which is not affiliated with Liberty Live directly. That's Liberty University's 3 hours.
They just ripped off the name because...
Yeah, Liberty University did, because this church has been around for like 100 years or something. Like a legacy church.
I love that.
Whatever, I don't know what.
But actually, Liberty University was not originally named Liberty University. Is that right?
I have no idea. Tell me.
I think that it was like it was actually just a branch of Thomasville Road as a school first. Okay. Anyway, we digress. That's not what the people are tuning in to hear.
Imagine thinking people are tuning in.
Dozens, brother, dozens. So really, let's kind of talk about the way that this went down. You and I just had it out, came to blows one day in the office, and not just kidding. I'm just kidding. Why don't you start and let's just kind of walk through the story of the process just a little bit.
Yeah, let me start by saying, if you have friends in ministry, you should share this podcast with them, because I am proud of the way that we walked through this together, and I think a lot of churches do this very poorly. And I appreciate how you navigated this with me. I appreciated how Liberty Live allowed me to navigate this with each other. And I don't know, I think that this is worth listening to, because one of the things that happens is in ministry, if there's an unhealthy situation, unhealthy context, all of a sudden, boom, here's some big information, and you're left at a deficit because that guy or that girl is gone in 2 weeks.
Yes. Even though I cracked myself up by saying, I wish you would have told me about this before Sunday. The truth is, I knew about it long before. So,
yeah. So we were sitting on a couch over there in the lobby, actually, and I don't remember what we were talking about, but my buddy Austin had shot me a text and said, hey, I know you've told me not to executive pastor up your life, because I've told him from the jump, he was a kids pastor at Calvary, and I'm like, man, you are just wired.
And now hold on, Calvary is where you were on staff with when you came to the Orchard.
That's right. Yep.
Up in North Carolina.
Yes, that's right, in Winston-Salem. And he just got those giftings of like, and I've told him like, you're gonna be an executive pastor one day, and I appreciate that, but I want to be your friend, and I don't need you to be my executive pastor all the time. And so I told him, don't executive pastor my life to death. Let's just be buddies, that kind of thing. And I'll let you know when I want some executive pastor in my life. And so the text he actually sent me was like, hey, I know I've told you, or you've told me not to executive pastor your life, but I think that this would be a great fit. And I kind of at first hemmed and hawed about it, because it's a next gen pastor position, which is what I did when I came to the Orchard initially back in 2018. And that just felt like a weird step to me. Like, it's not really a step that I wanted to take, because I love what I do in ministry. I love the campus pastor role. And so I was kind of like, oh, I'm flattered. That's great, but not really interested. And I think it was about 3 weeks, and it just lingered and lingered and lingered. And I'm like, why is this thing not going away? And so I reached out to you. I reached out to a couple other friends who are further along, some in ministry, some not, just solid guys that I trust and have a great walk with Jesus. And to a person, everybody said the same thing, which is go through the process. Maybe there's clarity in the process, and just start seeing what happens when you start walking through the process. And so we did. And I started walking through the process. This was back in, I guess it would have been either late September or early October.
Maybe, sounds about right.
Something like that. Yeah, because I know, subplot in this whole story, I knew the timeline of the roof we wanted, because we wanted to move to Lake City and be closer to Lake City location. And so that timeline kind of helped me with remembering this timeline. And started walking through the process, and the way they navigate the process is, they do a get-to-know-you phone call. And that's kind of like the vibe check, I guess. Is this guy a serial killer? Is he okay? And so...
and I mean, to be honest, I thought that's where it would end, when they vibe checked you, but it didn't. So I guess
that's when the recruitment was shut down. And so did that. Then they do 2 Zoom interviews, and so we started walking through the 2 Zoom interviews, and those are really like, okay, well, who are you? What do you do? Like, what makes you do the things you do? What are your theological positions? All that kind of stuff. And so we did that twice, and it's kind of like, if they're ready to take the next step, they'll say, hey, I would love to schedule the next one, whatever. Yeah. And I had been completely transparent with them up to this point. Was like, man, like, I don't know. Like, you're asking me if I'm gung ho or whatever. And I was just transparent with them and said, I'm committed to the process, because that's what I've been counseled to do. So like, at this point, after 2 Zoom interviews and all that, I'm like still pretty wildly indifferent, and I told them that, like, I'm, could take it or leave it.
Well, to get a little bit more, I guess, transparent in the process of everything is, as you and I talked about it, and specifically the position itself, the position is inherently not necessarily what you are wired and love doing, which is leaning a little bit more administrative than relationally. Not that there's all ministry is relational, but maybe flesh that out a minute.
Well, I was super transparent with him about that too. He said, if I was going to ask your last 2 bosses, what are you great at and what are you terrible at, what would they say? And because I was walking through the process so like unmoved, I guess at this point, I kept it a buck. Like if you ask the last 2 bosses, they'd probably say I'm great with people and am good at the pastoral side of things. They would also tell you that I'm going to drop, the administrative side of things pretty regularly, I guess. Maybe not regularly, but it is a struggle for me. It doesn't come naturally to do the administrative side of things.
My boy ain't wired for the office.
Right. And so
and he's wired for the boat and the tree stand and the coffee table, which is really what you've been able to lean into at the Orchard and lean into that side of your gifting. So this was, a completely different side of ministry for you. Not completely different, like I say, because you did do a lot of this when you came to the Orchard, but it's definitely not a 1-for-1, I guess is what we're saying.
Right. And there's a part of that I was like, man, like if I had to pick, do I pastor, a congregation or do I shepherd 21 people? I just personally have loved the location pastor role, and I love getting to walk through life in all different seasons with families and with, the grandmas and grandpas, and then the kids where dad says, hey, I think my kid's ready for a gospel conversation. Like, I'd love the whole spectrum. You get all of it. And so to me, I think maybe that was some of the unappeal to the next gen side of things. But one of the things that has been consistent in every season of ministry is, and really just life in general, is Jesus starts to change your desires over time, especially if it's the thing he's calling you to.
Well, and that's part of why I wanted to lean into that specific aspect of the story, because I think that people always assume that Jesus calls you to take the next step forward, so to speak, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're laying out the, promotion ladder in the life of a pastor, so to speak, right? Like after location pastor, you would think, okay, I'm maybe going to be an executive pastor or a lead pastor or something like that. But really, the next gen pastor is almost like stepping off of one ladder onto another in many ways. And so I think it's important for people to understand that God doesn't always call you to what comes naturally, to what's easy, to what, quote, is the next logical step. And I think we miss that sometimes because, the running joke that I've always had in ministry is I just think it's wild how God always calls pastors to churches where they get a raise.
That's crazy.
You know what I mean? And I say that because, at the Orchard, man, the Orchard had been around for 10 years before we were able to hire a staff person that didn't have to take a pay cut to come on staff, So I think that's just an important part of the story for people who are like, one, more than curious, trying to figure out how this bleeds into their life, is that, look, what God's calling you to next may not be, what you would consider, this is my wheelhouse.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think you have to be open to that.
Yeah. And that's probably the biggest thing I was wrestling through. And Katie and I both, because we were just like, man, on paper, this doesn't make sense. Right. But God doesn't always operate with the org chart or what's on paper. And so,
yeah. And you and I talked about that this morning, is there were some similarities when I came to the Orchard, because I had been, the senior pastor, no 55 plus jokes there, the senior pastor at the church I was serving in Mayo. And when I came to the Orchard, I don't know how many of you even know this, I was actually the group's pastor when I came to the Orchard. And if there's one place in ministry that I suck at, it's being a small group leader. But that was not a deterrent from the call, right? And so I had to walk through a little bit, hey, are you sure about this? You're not going to be preaching any Sunday? Because we're pretty sure that preaching might be what you're most gifted at, Chip. Why,
Right.
And having to walk through that and then understand, but I love to be called into a position that I think, hey, this is what I'm made for. Yeah, but that's not always what you're called to next.
No, and I think God's taught us a lot through this process. And I think one of those things is like, if you just lived in what's comfortable all the time, there'd be no room for growth, And I think that that's one of the beautiful things is there's going to be, as we get into the story, I think there's going to be a season of growth and using those tools, because let's be clear, as much as I don't prefer the administrative side of things, I think it's safe to say 6.5 years ago I was much worse at it than I am today, You
know what?
Please affirm that.
Very safe to say. And we'll just leave
not,
it at that.
Carry
we'll hear that. Very safe to say. Yeah. So, and as we talked about, AJ, and I have talked about for years, it's that the destination is not what Jesus is most concerned with. It's the journey.
That's right.
And maybe this is just part of your journey into shaping who you need to become, not necessarily what you're being called to do.
Yeah. And I think that's when, and one of the things we've talked about several times in this podcast is like, how do I hear from God? And I had gone through just about every outlet of, for the love of God, give me some clarity, because at this point, after the second Zoom call, right, I was like, and so we were just kind of waiting to hear back. Their next step after the Zoom calls would be, hey, come up on an in-person visit. And typically, the way we had been communicating, that's kind of the thing that they would reach out to and say, hey, we want you to do this.
Yeah.
And I hadn't heard anything, and so I was like, in the midst of all that,
it was a minute.
It was, yeah. It had been maybe a couple weeks, the longest it had been without hearing from them.
Yeah, to the point that, and you and I talked about this afterwards. I was like, oh yeah, my boy's cooked.
Like, too honest.
Like he's done, and I had kind of written it off. I thought that chapter had closed.
Yeah.
But that wasn't the case.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I think. And this is my perspective on it, but the guy, my buddy Daniel, had called me and said, hey, this is typically what would happen next, but I think we're just kind of not sure where you are with the process. And I said, well, I'm going to be honest with you. I've been honest with everybody else on both sides of the coin. That's because I'm not really sure where I'm at. And we have been through the process now. We've had 2 people on campus looking for our position to fill, right? And so I understand what he said next when he said, to us, this step is kind of like an engagement. Like, you're not locked in if you come up on a visit, but it's a big step for you to meet our staff, meet our people. And
we're bringing you in,
right?
Which is kind of the similar thing for us. Like, when we talk with somebody, when we say, okay, let's bring them in, that means let's get really serious.
Right, exactly. And so he said, but because we take it so seriously, we want to make sure like it's a step you take if you're ready to take it, not just kind of willy-nilly. And so that might be the only time willy-nilly's ever been used on the podcast, will ever be used on the podcast. Bet. So it was like we were having that conversation as an in-between to, are we going to go up on the visit? And it had nothing to do with anything he said, I don't think. But I was telling him, man, like back in, and this is where this part of the story comes into play, back in my junior year of college, we weren't super close, but he just was like on a whim, took me to lunch. He's like, man, I want to take you to lunch. And so he took me to lunch one day and just said, I just feel like the Lord wanted me to tell you this, right? And you're always kind of cautious of that, especially early on. Yes. I was way more conservative than I am even now. But he's like, I just like feel like you have the giftings for church planning, and one day God's going to call you to that. And so I told him, like, I was like, man, like, this is why this doesn't make sense to me, because I have, from that moment when you spoke that into me to now, I have seen the Lord affirm the thing that you told me back in, what would that have been, 2015, right? And so 2014. And so that, it was just another layer. And I was honest with him, like, it just doesn't make sense to me if this is where I believe the Lord is pushing me. And in that same conversation, and it was like he was sitting in the bed next to me, not audibly, but as clear as day, I felt like the Lord spoke into the process for the first time throughout the entire process. And we're talking like over a month. And I had gotten nothing from prayer time or reading or anything, just no word from the Lord. And in this moment, I felt like he was sitting next to me and said, if you're going to church plant one day, it's never going to be easier than this right here, where you move away from everything and you go to a place I've called you to, and you insert yourself into a context you're unfamiliar with. And to me, it was so clear. He would tell you this. I started to get emotional on the phone because like all this month and a half or whatever it had been of me praying through this and asking for clarity. And that had been our prayer. God, I don't need a yes or no. I just want clarity. Like whatever you tell me, I will do. If I can go confidently, if I can hear you clearly, and I'll do whatever you ask me to do if I know it's you telling me. And so for the first time, I felt like we have clarity here and we need to take the next step. And so we agreed we'll take the next step. Katie and I went up there. on a visit, and this is where the story gets even a little bit funkier, in my opinion, because now we're up here, and we kind of thought, and I haven't really told many people this. This is kind of like a, just a personal piece that had unfolded for us. But we got up there, and man, they were such great hosts, and they were awesome, and they had done everything you could possibly do to just be gracious hosts. And yet Katy and I still had this sense of like, we just don't know. Like, we thought this trip was going to be Yeah, we were waiting on it to be like a light shining down from heaven, angels singing, bells and whistles, like, yeah, this is where you need to be, and we're going through everything. And it could have been, we only took JJ, so we're missing our kids. It could have been, when you're there, the reality of I'm 10 hours away is setting in. It could have been, we don't have any friends up here. It could have been a million different things, right? But we just kind of were like, or it could have been an unsettled feeling because the Lord wanted us to push further into that moment. And so we're getting ready to leave. And I had been asking Katy, I'm like, I don't, like, it's not vibing with me. Maybe it's vibing with her, kind of thing. And maybe not vibing is the wrong word. I don't know. There's all these emotions and feelings, and you're not really sure how to label them sometimes. But
vibe is just a super catch-all.
It is, isn't it? It is. And so Saturday we went to leave so that we could be back for Sunday. And I just woke up on my own really early that morning, and I was like, just kind of not with an alarm, just whatever. And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to go pray. And I left Katy and JJ, and I went and prayed. And my prayer was mostly this: God, I've been asking you for clarity, and I felt like you gave me clarity on that phone call. And now we're up here, and I'm unsure again. And you don't have to do this. And I want to be clear about this part. God does not have to do this, but I would love if you would just give me a massive green light to say, yes, this is for sure where I want you to be. And so we get done with the prayer time or whatever, and we leave, and we do breakfast with the executive pastor and his wife, who were just incredibly gracious. And we go to the airport, and I get a text. First text I got was, your flight's delayed. Great. Second text I got was from Daniel. Said, hey, man, just want to make sure you guys made it to the airport okay. Got something I want to tell you and something I want to ask you. And I even told Katy, I was like, well, here's the breakup text. Like, we wanted a green light. It wasn't by, this is us breaking up.
It's not me, it's you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not you, it's me.
Right. And so I said, yeah, we just had our flight delayed. Give me a call whenever. So he called me. He said, hey, man, just wanted to let you know, like, my wife and I, we really loved getting to hang out with you guys at lunch. It was really great to get to meet your, part of your family, whatever. Here's what I wanted to tell you. I wanted to tell you that our young adult pastor resigned the day after you got here. And that was interesting to me because as I'm processing that, this was the guy, everybody said, they broadcast their sermon out from the main campus. And so there's not preaching opportunities for campus pastors and whatever like there is here. It's just a different layout. And so what I had been told is, well, if you like to preach, it's probably going to be a fill-in on a Wednesday night, or you can get on the Tuesday night schedule with the young adult pastor because they have a Tuesday night service for 18 to 30-year-olds.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, well, I met that guy. That was kind of the guy I was, hoping to get on the schedule with or whatever. And so it was interesting because he said, that's what I wanted to tell you. What I wanted to ask you is that something you're interested in? Because we all kind of agreed you would be a great fit. The issue is we haven't really interviewed you for, a preaching position. Like, it hasn't been on our, part of our process or whatever. And so I wanted to ask you that because we think you would do good at it. We just don't know if it's something you like to do. And so for Katy and I, on the heels of, God, we think you're calling us here. It's a little unsettling. Can you please give us a massive green light? Buzzer beater phone call at the airport to say, God, for me, it was like God saying, hey, I'm calling you to this, and it's something that you're going to do, and there's parts of your giftings we're going to use there, but it's not your first choice. It was also like, he was like, but don't worry, I'm going to be gracious, and I'm still going to give you an outlet for the thing that you love to do, which is, shepherd people in that capacity as well. Yeah. And so for us, that was kind of like Katy and I were like, yo, this is crazy. And so,
well, one of the things that we've said for a while, I feel like at the Orchard, and is that, it feels like God says no a lot louder than he says yes.
Right.
Right. And there was never a no in the process.
Right.
Which is why you kept moving forward.
Yeah.
But there was never a yes.
Yeah.
Right. And then you feel like this was the yes moment.
Yeah. This was which I would say is the second yes, because I'm telling you, I couldn't have heard it more clearly during the first yes, but then it was just like unsettling, I guess is the word. And I think that's part of God's sovereignty, saying, yeah, I want you to lean in a little more. I want you to press in a little more.
Yeah, got it.
And then once that happened and we pressed in, and here's the other cool piece to God's sovereignty, is God had Saturday morning's prayer answered before I ever prayed it, because all that unfolded the day after we got in, before everything was like, oh man, what do we do?
So did you push the guy out when you got there? You're like, hey, bud, I'm here, baby.
Just kid.
This is AJ.
Yeah. No, I don't think so. He seemed like a cool guy. And I'm sure Katie and I would be really good friends with him and his wife. But
I was fully joking in case any Liberty Live people want to listen to this, by the way.
Covering the bases here. Yeah. So that was kind of for us, like, goosebumps moment. Like, man, God, we prayed for clarity. We prayed for a green light.
Jesus, was this you or Taco Bell?
Yeah.
That you were pretty confident. Okay, Jesus, not Taco Bell.
Exactly right.
I got you.
Exactly right. So, yeah, that's when, so we talked to Daniel, told him, yeah, we'll absolutely, lead pastor called too. And, we talked through that with him. He just wanted to affirm, hey, I want you to hear this from me, not just from them. And, so it was cool. It was exciting. I think we are excited, over the course of the last couple of weeks, it's been brutal, as reality sets in, but there's also been, like I said earlier, Jesus starts to change your desires a little bit. And so this thing that was is now something we are looking forward to, in a very real sense, but you're just dealing with, like you said, it's not a funeral to goodbye, but it feels like a funeral in many ways.
Sure.
So
it does, because kind of my motto for you guys and for the church has been, and if you weren't in Lake City yesterday, hear me say it, they are moving, not dying.
Yeah.
Which is, in a world like we live in now, not what it was 50 years ago. You know what I mean? Now, I'm not going to say that relationships stay exactly the same, but they're still relationships.
Yeah.
They still have relationships with people. We have a friend who was in ministry, who was in this area and then moved away from this area. We still got a group text that we are in, pretty randomly, even though I turned mine off before you guys are done for the night. And I think that's a part of the perspective to have there. But talk about, AJ, why those conversations are so hard. Because I think that there's a piece of that puzzle that, hey, it's good that they're hard, like you've already mentioned, but they're also hard because there is sadness and joy.
Yeah. Yeah. You get a chance to reflect. And this is like, I don't even know if I should say this out loud. Don't be offended if you weren't on it. But we kind of had a list in our head of like, hey, these are people we need to tell before Sunday, and so we really, but
these are people who may stab us if we don't, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And so it would
have been great to be on that list before Sunday, though, by the way.
Gosh, that was funny. It was just like, man, these are people who have just been so gracious to us. And these are people who we've walked through some really difficult seasons of life with, or some really joyful seasons of life with. And we want them to know how much we love them and miss them. And that's why I wanted to be the one on stage Sunday saying, like I said Sunday, I want you to hear from me, because I want you to know how much this church has meant to me. I want you to know that there's not a lot of churches that would take a 24-year-old wet behind the ears and say, we'll let you grow into being a pastor.
Yeah, you said green behind the ears Sunday, and it was all I could do not to correct you. Wet behind the ears is I
heard it when I said it. That's why I corrected it this morning. But yeah, like that's just not common. And it's not common to let a young pastor do that without the disgruntledness. And so I love this church. I love our people. It was incredibly difficult saying goodbye, because you're a part of people's stories and they're a part of your story, and you love them and you know things about them that nobody else knows, and you walk through the hardest parts of life with them and the best parts of life with them. And it's the epitome of bittersweet. Like, it is bitter to leave that, but it is sweet to know that you got to do it, and God's going to usher you into the next season where you're going to get to do it again. And so I don't know, but you give your life to this ministry thing, and that's the part that not everybody's going to understand, and that's okay. But in ministry, at the drop of a hat, when you surrender to God, you've got my life. You don't really know what that means in the moment.
Yeah.
And then as you start your journey, you see moments of sacrifice along the way, and some are easy, some are not. But this is what I've given my life to.
Well, it's difficult, right? Because in ministry, you pour your life into those people.
Yeah.
And you're all in. And I think that there's a sense when you leave a place that, and I'll speak for myself, that you are letting the people down that you're leaving. And that's hard, but you know that you have to, whether you want to or not. There's a piece of you that wants to, because it is exciting what's next, and you want to move into what God's calling you. But I think the reality for pastors is that you do feel like you're letting those people down when you move away. And that's difficult, because it's one of those things like we talk about. We know the truth in our head. It doesn't always help our emotions.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's, I'm an Enneagram 7, right? And so I'm probably going to cope with it a little bit better than most.
Enneagram 7s avoid negative emotions like the plague.
Oh, it's so true. But I'm so for that reason, I'm probably going to process it better than most. But the other side to that is like, I do, if you could see what I have seen, right? And this is what I want for every believer. And this is why we preach, and we hope that they grab it, and they hope they take a leap of faith and take us at our word and at God's word, really. But if you have seen what I've seen in every season of our life as believers, God has just been faithful and gracious. It's like there's a big part of me I can't wait to see what God's going to be faithful with next. I can't wait to see what God's going to be gracious with next, because this season has been way more than I could have ever asked for or imagined. And I can't wait to see how the next one looks. And maybe I'm setting myself up for failure, because it could be, in any season, God could say, hey, here's your growing season. But he just has been so gracious. And so there is a level of excitement there. But the bitter side of that is you have to reflect, because now this season that you've walked through is a season that's going to be in the past.
Well, let's touch on this. And this is maybe something that we don't talk about a lot, but we always feel like emotions are always competing, right? That they can never be good emotions, bad emotions, happy, sad, don't coexist. But that's not entirely true. As a matter of fact, in Ezra chapter 3, the people of Israel have been taken out of captivity. They've come back home. They've rebuilt the temple. They offered sacrifices on the temple. And when the foundation of the temple is completed, this is what happened. In Ezra chapter 3, verse 10, it says, when the builders had laid the foundation of the Lord's temple, the priests, dressed in their robes and holding their trumpets, and the Levites descended from Asaph holding cymbals, took their positions to praise the Lord as King David of Israel had instructed. They sang with praise and thanksgiving to the Lord, for he is good, his faithful love to Israel endures forever. Then all the people gave a great shout of praise to the Lord, because the foundation of the Lord's house had been laid. But many of the older priests, Levites, and family heads who had seen the first temple wept loudly when they saw the foundation of this temple. But many others shouted joyfully. The people could not distinguish the sound of the joyful shouting from that of the weeping, because the people were shouting so loudly and the sound was heard far away. And the idea is there was weeping for what was, but there's shouts of joy for what is going to be. And I think that's kind of, both of those coexist at the same moment. One does not overtake the other. They really just coexist for a period of time in the transition.
Yeah. Katy was doing a devotional 2 mornings ago, and that came up.
Really?
Yeah. It's true. It's such a phenomenal example of you pay homage to what has been, but you understand there's something new on the horizon. And honestly, this is the other part of it. God has taught me so much in this season of transition. And one of those things is, I struggled with, God, this is a big church. Why do they need me? They don't. They could go probably hire anybody in the country. And the Orchard is not a big church in the grand scheme of things. We're a big church for our area, by all intents and purposes. And so this was probably more pride than I care to admit, but it's almost like, why are you taking that guy from the small school and moving him to the big school? The small school needs him, not the big school. And
is that how it is, AJ?
That's what but that's how it felt to me. And it was like, God said, hey man, first of all, you're not that big of a deal. Second of all,
amen.
One rookie doesn't stop a circus. And
that
third
is
of all,
an Eddieism right there, baby.
It doesn't. Third of all, I love the local church more than you will ever love the local church.
Yeah, that's right.
And so if I'm moving you out, you can rest assured I'm moving something else in, and you are not going to be the reason a season rises or falls. I am sovereign enough to know exactly what I'm doing. And that's not just moving you away, that's moving something else in. And so there's a part of me that is excited to cheer the orchard on from afar now that God has walked me through all that, because I know, and there's a part of me that's jealous of it too. Like, God's got something coming, and I have no idea what it is. I'm not going to be a part of it in that sense, but it's going to be good because he loves the orchard more than I will ever love the orchard. And that means a lot to me because I love the orchard a lot.
That's really good that God does not leave his sheep untended, right? Well, let's do this. Let's process some negative emotions, but
that is just not Chris.
Let's do this in a way. I want to be clear up front. We are not prophesying nor speaking over what's coming for AJ.
Yeah.
But here's what I know from my story, right? When we left Mayo and came to the orchard, the first month we were here was hell. And here's what I mean. Not anything to do with the church. We bought a house. The first night we moved in the house, a water line bust in the wall.
Oh, gosh.
And we walk into the closet in the master bathroom and it's flooded.
I just want to say I rebuke that in the name of Jesus for what's coming.
Also, the month we were there, the first month we were there, my wife and 2 small children kept passing the flu to one another and strep the first month we were there. And so all of our friends back in Mayo keep asking the question, are you sure the Lord called you there?
Right.
Is he trying to tell you something? And the truth is that success, quote unquote, is no indication whether or not this was the Lord's will.
Yeah, right.
Right?
That's 100% right.
And so all of that happening in the first month that we were here did not lessen the fact that, no, this is where the Lord has called us to be.
Mm-hmm.
So you talked about, man, this is going to be a chance to grow. We're excited about what's coming. There's the temptation, right? And again, this is my whole caveat of I'm not prophesying nor speaking over.
Yeah.
If AJ moves up there and it's terrible, I hate this job. What am I doing? I don't know what's happening. I just got fired. Now we're homeless and destitute. And again,
Not fired.
No, hear me. None of that worst case scenario that anybody could ever imagine can be used to negate whether or not the Lord has called you there.
Yeah.
And I think we miss that in life sometime because we believe that whatever the Lord's calling us to is going to be successful.
Yeah.
It's going to be up and to the right. Mm-hmm. And yet that's just not the case, right? You look at the prophet Jeremiah. Mm-hmm. Jeremiah was literally told, you're going to go prophesy, you're going to preach, you are the weeping prophet for how your heart's going to break, and nobody is going to care. And nobody is going to listen. And I think it's important for us as we talk about following the call in ministry specifically, but in life generally, success up and to the right, man, this is amazing and I love it, is no indication that you were or were not called.
Yeah. No, that's so good. In fact, Daniel had shared this with me, my buddy up there. He was like, there's going to be, he said much of the same, like you're going to be tempted, and there could be a level of temptation that says, is this the right move or is this not the right move based on what happens with your house and yada, yada, yada. And he's like, I'm telling you, I couldn't have been more confident we were called here and our house didn't sell for 6 months and we were paying, whatever. And so much of the same, like your circumstances do not indicate whether or not you are or not called. If that was true, Job would have been in trouble. Jeremiah would have been in trouble. And the enemy is constantly trying to thwart the thing that God is doing. And so you have both sides of that coin. You have God saying, hey, I want to grow you. And then you have the opposition saying, I want to make sure this is as painful and as brutal as possible when you say yes.
And the pain can be part of the growth.
Yeah, absolutely.
For the record, I want to, since I led with this, also follow up with this. I do not believe that AJ will get fired or be homeless. That's not the point. Don't let that be the takeaway from what I said.
In the name of Jesus.
But it's just the idea that we can't, we say this all the time in our messages. Our external circumstances are some of the most unreliable evidence available as to what the Lord is doing.
Terrible measuring sticks.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So that's good. I know that there's more to the story, but hopefully that gives you a piece of the picture. If you're like, man, what happened here? What's going on? And what AJ said is a conversation that I've had with every one of our staff members here at the church, is that, man, I want what Jesus wants for you guys. I want what's best for you guys. AJ, you and I have had this conversation for years. Selfishly, I want you to be right here with me for the long haul. But at the end of the day, I want what's best for you.
Yeah.
And I want to have that relationship where it can be like, okay, hey, if you come to me that I'm talking to another church, that doesn't mean that you're fired, right? Go figure it out. We're not good enough for you. Mm-hmm. It means, hey, let's figure this out. Let's walk through this together. Because like you said, this is Jesus's church, not ours.
Yeah.
And the best place we can be is in the center of his will, not where's most comfortable or enjoyable.
Yeah, and this is the part I wanted to be clear on the front end. Like, man, if you're this is why I wanted you to share this with people in ministry, because if you're in Chip's position and you are running the ship by all intents and purposes, and you are the lead guy who is in charge, and you do not operate that way, you probably should get a check of some sort, because the way that you navigated it with me, to be able to say those things that you said to me over and over again, hey, if there ever comes a moment where it's time for you to take your next step, I'm not against you, I'm for you. And I want, like, how many times would the guy put his lead pastor on the reference sheet knowing in full confidence, this guy's for me? It just doesn't happen.
Yeah, that was bold of you to trust me to fill out the reference question.
All you probably did was affirm what I told him. Like, you can't kill me, I'm already dead.
Yeah, what is his theological convictions? I'm not sure he has any of that.
What's a conviction? The guy's allergic to him. No, but like, to have you, like, for me to be able to start navigating the process and know, man, Chip is my pastor, but he's my friend as well, and he truly does want what's best for me. That is just it's disgusting that it's unheard of, but it's almost unheard of in ministry. Because
it truly is disgusting that it's unheard of.
Yeah.
Because it fires me up when we like to talk about, our churches aren't our kingdom, and we say that, but you can tell when it's true and when it's not. Yeah. And the way that the Orchard is set up is just full transparency. If you're listening to this, you guys know that the relational shepherding giftings are not my strong suit. I'm all in with who I'm with, but I just have such a small bandwidth on some of that stuff. However, what I've told you guys over and over is, you guys be the primary shepherd for our people, and I want to pastor you. I want to care for you. And the fact that that's just not the case a lot of places, it's truly disgusting, because as your friend and as your pastor, why wouldn't I want to see you succeed in your journey of following Jesus?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So yeah, disgusting is the right word there. And I had this conversation last night. I hate pastors who bash other pastors, which I guess is a way of me bashing another pastor. I don't know. I was in Inception for a minute, but I see it all the time where pastors tell their church, don't you go to a church where a pastor doesn't do exactly what I do, because this is what a man of God does, and that just fires me up. But I will take the stand that if you are leading a church, an organization, your family, and it's about controlling them for your interest rather than wanting to see them flourish in God's design for your life, you have a problem.
Yeah.
And it needs to be checked.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's what this does. If you're in leadership, what this allowed me to do, not that I had intentions of doing it otherwise, but it allows me to walk through the entire process with integrity, because I know this guy is for me. And if you're on the other side of that, here's what I would say. Whether your lead pastor has given you that opportunity or not, it should not stop you from walking through it with integrity, because Jesus doesn't lose, and obedience is always better, and being forthcoming is always better. So even if Chip had not walked through that process and I had not felt comfortable doing that, the right move would have been to be forthcoming and honest, despite how many scars I would have attributed along the way, because God is sovereign and God will bless obedience when those moments happen.
Yeah, I think that the obedience is a key part there, because there is an integrity that comes with doing this the right way, and far too often we we miss that, right? We try. This is a great transition to this part of it, because undoubtedly there are people in our church who were blindsided Sunday by this. And that's not, we don't want you to feel that. We weren't keeping a secret to keep a secret.
Right.
Right. That's never the intent. Transparency is a core value, and we want to live and operate with integrity. So why don't you take a minute, AJ, to talk about why we didn't talk about this publicly with the church until yesterday?
Yeah. Well, for one, I think there's so many ways this could go. And when we look at the timing and we look at the way it laid out, it was important for me personally, and I appreciate that both Chip and Michael understood. It's important for me to be able to be the one that shares my heart with you on that Sunday morning where I tell you that. And I wanted you guys to hear from me, not from the grapevine, because we all know how the grapevine operates. Everybody's been in middle school and high school at some point or another, and it just never goes well when it's, oh, he said, she said. Telephone can be such an awful game to play. And so we wanted you to hear it from us, Katy and I both, on stage together. Gosh, I love my wife. If you want to know how to operate and function, if you're listening to this and you are in ministry and you want to know what a pastor's wife should look like or be like, go grab coffee with my wife before we leave, because she has been the most incredible blessing I have ever had and maybe will ever have in ministry, period. But we wanted to be the ones telling you on that Sunday morning. And the reason we waited until this Sunday and worked out a timeline is because when you drag these things out too long, it can be kind of like, all right, well, we know this guy's not going to be here, so we don't want to include him in the plans that are happening in 6 months, but we don't want him to just sit in the office and do nothing. And so there's that tension too. And so the timeline we worked out was we tell people this Sunday, and then it gives us 2 more Sundays to celebrate more and whatever with our people and just remember the joys that we've had, because 3 Sundays felt right. 4 felt like it probably would have been too long. 2, I didn't want people to show up and be like, wait, what happened? I missed, because our people attend 1.8 Sundays a month. Well, that might even be the American church's average attendance, right?
It's the American churches.
If you're attending 1.8 Sundays a month and you don't show up, where'd my pastor go? Oh, he's gone. He just went for, so that gives us a little bit of a runway, but not too much of a runway to feel like we're really dragging this thing out. And the other side of that is, if we're both confident, whether you fight it or as much as you possibly fight it or can possibly fight it, the reality is when we make that decision, there's going to be pieces of me that are thinking toward what's next.
That's right.
Katy and I have really tried to fight that, to be honest, because I've seen that go awful as well in the transition period. And so we have committed, and they've done a great job of letting this be the case, to be as present as possible, as long as possible. And so outside of the 2-week break that we just took for vacation and rest and getting things together, I am here until the 9th, and I am invested until the 9th. And you can either pick my brain or not pick my brain until the 9th. You know what I mean?
You got to get those receipts in before the 9th.
Mary's shouting amen from her Volkswagen.
So the other part of the reason I wanted to lean into that, though, is though we kept it from a public announcement until Sunday, it was never something that we were going to lie about.
Right.
And that's part of why I'm glad that the Deucer here is sitting in front of the microphone.
Yeah.
Because at Jingle Jam in Branford, you were gone. That's when you were in your in-person visit in Virginia.
Right.
And, everybody missed you, but I think Chris and Jules are like, no, this is weird.
Yeah.
Where is he? So
they did press, didn't they? Yeah.
Why don't you talk about that for a minute? Because I think it's important. When I say transparency and integrity, I want you to know that we will never lie to you at the Orchard. But if we don't tell you something, usually we have a reason. But sometimes we get called to the carpet and we're not going to deny it. So why don't you go ahead and talk about that?
Well, we work so close with all of y'all. It's like when one of y'all are missing, it's like, what's happening?
Yeah.
What's going on with this person? Especially with such a big event that we were doing with Jingle Jam. It's like, why isn't AJ here? Yeah. He needs to be here. I want to.
He's not pulling his weight. Yeah, it was really Jules like mad. Like, what's AJ? No, I'm just kidding. That was not it at all. So you had to answer some questions then, AJ, when you came
Well,
back.
we see you most weeks 3 times, unless we're at Live Oak Branford on a Sunday
and it's
capturing.
such a blessing. You guys really are like one of the joys of my week. Just subplot. Carry on.
Thank you. And so
He's crying. You can't see him. The guy's bawling his eyes out.
Yeah, he is not.
So yeah, we asked everybody. Everybody's giving us different answers, and like, what is happening? So we pinned
Very
AJ.
vague, different answers.
Yeah. Not.
I think the answer to you was, I think he's up with a couple buddies from college in Virginia.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were like,
She had that they were on staff at a church.
had to go back to his university, and we're like, does he have to make sure he graduated, like got his degree? Like,
In fairness, when I said the college, I legitimately thought that I didn't know that they weren't that close together. I thought they were outside of Lynchburg.
Yeah.
So I was not intentionally misleading you on that one.
So we pinned AJ, and he was like, oh, we went on that next Sunday, I think it was,
Following Sunday.
and he was like, oh, we went to Orlando.
Which was also the truth because we had to drop our kids off. And flew out of
kids
Orlando.
up. Yeah,
That's right.
And we were like, well, they said you were going up north.
Yeah.
I think at that point, AJ was like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah. Which at that point too, I told Katie, I was like, I need to tell Chris and Jules, I love them. I need to just keep them in the loop. And so I circled back with you. I was like, hey guys, I got to tell you, I don't want you guys to be in limbo. And so that Sunday,
Yeah.
We had a conversation.
broke the news.
But that's important to me because there are some things that we need to be careful about how we say, when we say, for the good of the church as a whole. But we are committed to operate with integrity and transparency.
Mm-hmm.
And so that means we're not going to lie to you on those things. And it was just funny to me that Chris and Jules were picking up very quickly. Like, they're giving us an answer, but there's a lot missing in these answers.
Yes.
And so I think that was good.
Yeah. By the end of it, you probably had pieced together all true statements. if you would have put them on a poster board, you'd be like, all right.
So his timeline was,
Yeah.
Chris is the meme with like the strings on the board. Like, boy,
Yeah. 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 We love you guys, Chris, and we wanted to make sure you were in the loop for sure.
we're not crying on the podcast. Get it together.
No. Yeah.
So speaking of the podcast, some changes coming up because AJ sucks and
There it is.
he's going to be gone.
That part.
So we're gonna finish out the podcast strong, while you're still here. But I'm excited about what's next for the podcast too, because in a lot of ways we're going to be launching into season 2 of Let's Talk About That, where we're going to be bringing a lot more guests on and hearing some different stories from the guest and less stories about hunting and fantasy football, sadly, because we know how much those were close to your heart.
They were. They are.
Especially as AJ got to flex his hunting stories about his wildly expensive hunting gear, doing it for the gram.
Glad you brought this up. I got some notes.
Chris drive hours and hours.
Yeah, I got some notes here. I want to go ahead. I heard last week's podcast, listened to it as much as I possibly could, bearing through that. And a couple things I wanted to clear up from last week, and I'm glad Chris is here.
Let's Festivus this thing, baby.
Yeah. So, Chip, one of the statements you made last week, the best hunters you knew in Taylor County wore flannel, right? That's cool. The best hunters I know leave the firearms at home and the dogs in the box, and they go out with a stick and string. So that your version of the best hunters in Taylor County and my version of the best hunters, we just might be talking about two different things.
Yeah, I'm talking about effective hunters.
Yeah, effective is a stretch when it comes to your personal abilities or the dog running the deer down. Anyway, that's the first thing I would say. No offense, Hunter, but lots of offense. Second thing I would say, we don't pose till after the kill. And I made that note before I remembered Matt's picture, but I would say that Matt wasn't really posing.
No, Matt was, I didn't say posing, I said posted.
Posted up.
Posted up, son.
But man, it's so cool to get a memory. Like one of the things Cody Gamble does every year also, that is my fourth point here. I think somebody said Cody had a $1,200 camera. Brother. Yeah, okay. But what
You're saying it's more.
I'm saying 1,200. Yeah, I don't want to out Cody, but that might be on the lower end of the spectrum there. But it's so cool because you have that, and what he does every year is he puts a book together, and I meant to bring it in so you could look at it because I really do think you would love it. Deucer, you would love it too. But it's the whole calendar year of all the outdoor adventures we had gone on together, and so it's all documented. It's printed on a professional book with sheets, and it is so cool. Like if I want to go back into the 2024 book, I can go back in 2024 and I can relive all those moments, and just makes a great coffee table thing. It's just a really cool thing to have. Memories you'll have with your buddies forever.
Is the title of the book Do It for the Gram?
No, it's called 2024.
Oh, okay.
And 2025. Also, the last thing that I want to clear up here, and really the biggest piece, is Trey Lee. Speaking of integrity and a lack of it, right? Trey got on here last week and started lying on me, bro. He was out here saying I told Chris to drive 30 minutes for a photo shoot.
That's what I heard.
Absolutely not. What
Chris,
happened was...
Can you confirm or deny that you drove 30 minutes for a photo shoot?
I did not.
Oh.
Did not. Here's what happened, and this is hilarious because we were actually speaking of interviews. Lucas and I were scheduled to go to Tallahassee and interview Silas this day. Maybe I shouldn't have said his name. Maybe you can bleep that out or whatever. I don't know. But we were scheduled to go interview this fella, and I had stumbled into a deer at 7:38 or something like that. And so, but I made shout out to FOC Arrows, hi FOC, if you know, you know. Made a not great shot, blistered through the front shoulder bone. Deer ran about 130 yards, had to call a dog guy because we had no blood from a ground blind. Dog guy shows up, we find the deer, phenomenal. But by the time all this has unfolded, we're now pushing about 10 o'clock, and me and Lucas need to be on the road at 11. Or no, we're pushing 9:30. I have to do online record, and then I got to be to Lucas by like 11:30. So I load this deer up. I drive it to Lake City, and I'm like trying to get with Cody, but Cody had to go to a building or whatever, and I was like, what if we just took some pictures? And Chris was like, oh, let's do it. And so we drove out there to the shed, posted up.
So you were here at the Lake City location.
He was already here.
Pictures. Y'all were already together.
Yeah.
Chris did not drive to White Springs.
No. Pictures were here, back there by the shed. So Chris did a phenomenal job with those, by the way.
I don't even know who was going to record like the message.
Yeah.
But they weren't here yet.
It was probably Matt, if that's the case. Matt's...
Oh my gosh. Matt,
so we had time.
So many strings on the podcast.
We had time. Like, there wasn't like...
Actually, I do think it might have been for real, though. It might have been Chip. Because if something came up, or Eddie, or I think it was Chip or Eddie, like something had...
I'll probably go back and look. But...
Yeah, you should. And then put it in the comments. But, you know, Chris was here and, gosh, crushed the pictures. It was great. I blistered out of here as soon as I did the online record and dropped the deer off at the processor, and then met Lucas, and I was only 5 minutes late, and we slid out to Tallahassee, and it was phenomenal. Yeah, it was great. That's the real story.
And you had those pictures 30 minutes later. So.
And Chris had them edited and in the drive, baby.
So, Chris,
elite.
Would you have driven 30 minutes to take pictures of his deer?
No.
I wouldn't have asked Chris to drive pictures. I'd have been sorry. Cell phone.
I love that. All right. So I'm glad you were able to defend yourself.
Yeah.
Also, I stand by my generational gap hunting. And
there is a generational gap. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. I mean, you guys are doing it for the gram and are spending, paychecks on camouflage gear when Walmart has it all day for $11.97.
Imagine getting out there and freezing because you only got Walmart camo. You know what I mean? That's crazy.
You know how many times I've frozen in a tree stand? None.
Is that true?
That's true.
Because you got a Mr. Buddy heater in front of you?
No.
Okay, all right, just check.
Because you got a layer in North Florida.
Layers. It's just tough to pull a bow back with layers, but I think most of these guys probably wouldn't understand.
Speaking of which, I have a crossbow for sale. If anybody is interested.
Right here,
reach me out. If you mention the podcast, let's talk about that. You will get a discount of my original price.
Okay, but we're not going to tell you what that is so that you have no idea what the discount is.
You catch what I'm doing.
Yeah, I like that. That's smart. That's a good play.
Yeah, it's 4D chess, baby.
That's a good play.
So we are, I guess, about done for the podcast. I think that hopefully it's been helpful for you to hear a little bit more of the story, understand who we are, where we're at, what we're doing. But, again, reinforce one more time, moving, not dying.
Moving, not dying. And so many of you, I've already gotten Facebook friend requests, text messages, Facebook messages, all that kind of stuff. So reach out. Chip mentioned my bandwidth. I'm happy to chit chat.
Goodness.
All that kind of stuff. So
wild.
Also, buy my house, please. Shameless plug.
Right. That seems like a big ask, AJ. Seems like a big ask.
Oh, man.
Do you think it's priced fairly, or do you think you're just trying to get as much money as you can out of it?
I definitely don't think it's the latter. So I can go snag it right now.
That's hilarious.
Let me just say this one more time. I appreciate you, Chip. For real.
Hey.
I do.
I appreciate you there, big guy.
I really do.
Big red.
Yeah.
Definitely hiring somebody shorter.
That way you can stand on stage with them.
Absolutely.
I love it.
You know how many times AJ and I have stood on stage together over the years?
Like three.
Like 3
times.
Also, I feel like we have entered Fadegate state of the podcast. And I'm just saying, I'm about ready to pull the trigger, Chris.
Fadegate?
It's happening. How have you missed this? It's been like a discussion on the podcast since I think Tillman like started in, oh boy, you need to get faded up, Chip.
Yeah. I think
so. It's happening.
You would certainly draw in a younger crowd.
You know, I walk up on the stage and be like, hello, fellow kids.
What up, Dow?
Welcome, young people.
Next week, you got to have the hair done,
get right,
faded up,
and
I got
the hat off.
I got my boy from Harry.
Photo.
My boy from Harry.
Hey, get that
and hook me up.
Get that lightning bolt in the side. Get right.
You think so?
Oh, dude, come on.
Should I get like stripes shaved in my eyebrows too?
Yes.
Fire me up.
Yes. And then we'll. Yeah, I can't.
Because
that's great.
Everything about me just screams young.
Yeah, agree.
Because I'm not wearing a polo shirt with a quarter zip in the office right now with loafers.
Nice loafers. I will get. Oh, were those Chris's?
Those are dudes, baby.
No, yeah, those are nice. Yours
those are
nice.
dudes.
I was looking. Yours are nice too, Chris. But I couldn't remember whose feet I saw the.
Wow. All right, podcast just got weird.
Right.
So thanks for being with us, and we will catch you next week.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Let's Talk About That. We hope it encouraged and challenged you as we continue to grow in this journey of faith and embrace community. If you have more questions, thoughts, or feedback, we'd love to hear from you. Reach out to us through our social media channels or visit our website and stay connected. Your questions are what make this podcast a dynamic and enriching experience. If you found today's discussion meaningful, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review. Your engagement helps us spread the message and connect with others who may find value in these conversations. Until next time, we hope this episode inspired you and will help you bring Sunday's message into your week ahead. Keep the conversation alive, and remember, we're all on this journey together.